Gundam the Witch From Mercury, aside from being a goddamn mouthful, is the best giant robot series this year because Gundam does it best. It's what I would say if it were actually about giant robots and not anus Voldigold with robots attached. Gundam seems to want to ape on what every schlocky light novel does by placing the main character into a Yuri couple immediately upon the first episode's end and have it take place in a high school complete with a first episode bully and all. Well, I mean, he's not wrong. It's not inherently bad, and in general, I didn't dislike the first episode, but when coupled with the prologue, it does feel a bit disjointed, and it seems as if there's a disconnect between the staff. It does seem as if the writer is just writing a love letter to revolutionary girl Utano, which doesn't automatically make it good, but is also taking what that anime did and throwing some other good ideas into the pot and trying to cram it all together into a magic high school setup, and it just isn't working out so far. Because they don't know how to make it all work, they're just rolling with these inherently silly ideas without fully playing into them and instead just playing them straight. You have to fucking fight just to say sorry. It's so stupid. The director, on the other hand, seems to be going for a more grounded Gundam story to the point of even having an older character call out just how silly the entire dueling and high school system is. It 100% feels like it's channeling too many things at once while only partially understanding most of these concepts. And that's on top of the aforementioned writing having a disconnect from the direction, leading to moments like Eri being a fun and goofy weirdo, but at the same time being too socially bashful to follow through on anything. The setup is ripe with unnerving contrast, but they constantly recoil away from it just as it's starting to go somewhere, and its innate silliness doesn't mesh well with the serious, unnerving feel of the prologue, yet at the same time, it seems like that's what the show's going to try and be later on, which would be extremely jarring because these two things just don't mix, and that's ignoring how silly the main villain's motivations are. Robots shouldn't kill people, people should kill people. On the upside, the art and animation are very crisp, and the mechs are primarily 2D, which is always a plus. The show does feel a bit masturbatory towards the Gundam, as they suck its robocock every time it's on screen, but it doesn't ruin anything for the most part. The fights so far have also just been beam spam, but they do look pretty cool with excellent cinematography and direction, so it's a joy to watch, and while the writing may be poor, the direction is very solid, and it complements the OST extremely well, which itself is also very well done. The anime as a whole does seem a bit wishy-washy on where it wants to go, and it's a bit too nonsensically goofy when it's going to try and get you to take the politics and warfare seriously later on, but it was a decent watch, and I can see it improving as it goes. But honestly, I wish that tomato would squirt on my face. Gundam the Witch From Mercury was a great show that really leans into its strengths, but also a very bad show that doesn't do that all the time. When it focuses down and allows its story and characters a chance to breathe, we get things like, so I can suck your clit. But when it doesn't, you get poorly written dialogue that sounds very unnatural because it's trying to cram in as much exposition as possible, and it in general feels as if they took the concept of a Gundam show and then crassly crammed it into a generic magic battle high school to appeal to the youth, and then instead of just making it fun, they spend half of an episode trying to explain to older viewers how it's totally not just a clumsy mashup of ideas, but instead serious world building. Hello, friend who has been going to the same school as me and knows everything I do. Can you believe that you're as good as the rank of the company that recommended you? Yes, other friend with silly hair. I can hardly be proud of being born on Earth. Why are you both talking like that? It's very forced and overwrought, and it should instead be handled the same way they do the bad guy, where they'll spend 5 minutes explaining to him why the robot isn't a Gundam, and he'll just go, fuck you, it's a Gundam. What do you think, you're a king? Like, yes, I do. Which is hysterical in how the rest of this silly premise should be handled, rather than showing one guy being mean to an Earthian, which is all you need to infer the obvious, and then immediately showing an entire scene with forced and unnatural dialogue just to hammer home that one point. Fortunately, that's exactly what they do in episode 3, because while a main bulk of my issues came from how they mishandled episode 2, episode 3 is absolutely stellar and allows the story and characters to breathe, letting their silly nonsense play out for pure entertainment. They do the same thing whenever the super serious bad guy is on screen, and he's an absolute treat every single time. But episode 3 is when they really let the dumb teenagers just be dumb teenagers. Yo bro, you fight pretty good, marry me. And it's great primarily because of all the natural chemistry the characters have with each other, like Tomato constantly bullying the bully on accident. The silly corporal political technobabble can also work and still be entertaining at the same time, as seen in The Meeting in episode 2, but it's leading with it, like they did in the prologue, or trying to bend over backwards to explain its silly setting, rather than just rolling with the innate silliness that makes it a drag to watch at times. But it seems like they're improving on these fronts with every passing episode and really leaning into their main strength of overdramatic teenagers that skip the dating step and go straight to proposing to whomever they meet, and also this guy getting slapped. Funny every time. Gundam the Witch From Mercury, yes, I'm gonna say that every time, has continued to be an absolute treat with how great some of the comedy is. Yo, that girl's fucking dead. That I'm sure it's being completely intentional with. Probably. The characters have all been fun and fantastic, but the pink Pomeranian is a bit annoying with how one-note her character has been so far, with her entire personality being suspect. But they did manage to make it entertaining by having her beat the absolute shit out of some bullies. The writing itself in this episode was rather poor, however, as the entire thing was primarily just a contrived setup to have Tomato join the Earth House, to the point where even the test that they took didn't make much sense. But while there were certainly better ways of handling it, it was a nice touch to have Tomato actually break down and cry from all the attempts to show that she's not perfect. Her struggle is understandable, and it's refreshing that she stayed in character and broke down rather than being a super cool shonen protagonist about it like she has been up until this point, which has clashed a bit with her character. Imagine if those tears were semen. However, her stuttering gimmick is still a bit annoying, as she already has the muttering under her breath and speaking at an uneven pace thing in her speech to display her social anxiety. So adding the stutter on top of that is a bit overkill, and it's a very lazy way to try and display it when it's not even true to people with actual stutters, and rather a general affectation used just to try and endear you to her, thus making it feel lazy and tedious and fall flat as a result. But I bet the vibrations feel amazing. Likewise, the exam they take in this episode made sense until they were allowed to retry 20 times, but they're basically raising child soldiers and using their silly squabbles to control larger parts of the corporate government, as seen in episode 1, so it does make sense when viewing it through that lens that they wouldn't want to just fail and presumably expel students outright. But it's still a bit silly and nonsensical, unlike this scene where Tomato is afraid of the goat, as goats do indeed eat tomatoes. I will be your downfall, Suletta. The Earthian and Spatian squabble wasn't too on the nose blatant with the racism, except for Pink, who made it her mission to have it be very in your face, just like she did with this girl, which did make it a bit annoying. And overall, this show still seems to face the issue of not completely committing to one side or the other, silly magic high school hijinks or actual serious wartime Gundam plot, but the show still manages to be entertaining despite that, with Tomato being a tomato. Oh no, they bruised the tomato! The lack of actual Gundam fighting is a bit lackluster, but considering that that's likely all the second half of this show will be, I'm fine with this slower burn pace, even if some of the characters are objectively awful. Yo, how'd she get her hair in there? And the writing is a little iffy with episodes like this one. The comedy, intentional or not, is still great, and most of the characters are a joy to watch with proper and well-written characterization. Honestly, my only real complaint is that it's not silly or out there enough, as it's trying hard to half and half the silliness and corpo-political seriousness, but it's not working all that well, with this episode being a good example of that wishy-washiness, what with how the test seemed relevant to test their skills, but in reality, it was in such a nonsensical format that it only really existed as a writing device for Tomato to grow on the earth. Despite that, the character writing is fine and just needs a few tweaks, and the overall direction the show is going in just needs to be refined a bit, but it has the potential to be a diamond in the rough, and Tomato has the potential to be a ripe tomato once the show gets its engine going and stops meandering through everything. Just look at her. Gundam Witch From Mercury has been an absolute treat to watch every week, but it does have its downsides that I can see some people not enjoying because they have shit taste. Fortunately, however, while I was previously enjoying this show despite its glaring flaws, this latest episode managed to be an improvement in every sense of the word, and it has me hopeful that the series will continue in this direction and that Tomato continues to wear shorts. The character designs are good enough to carry the show on their own. I want to and their interactions are so fun that I can't help but ignore that it's not the best written thing out there. Oh, he's so adorable. While episode 5 was more of the same and slowly had me dropping the series from a 6 to a 5, episode 6 was the best we've got yet that blew every other episode out of the water. Hey, wait, where's the other girl? The direction was fantastic as it managed to perfectly intermix the mystery behind Tomato and Ariel, the serious corpo plot with Tomato's mom and Ellen's company, and it even had perfect comedic timing with Chickenhead randomly appearing in scenes to show that she wasn't invited, and Bolly being kicked out and forced to live in the woods. This is best girl. The writing actually did its job for once as well by intriguing me as to what was going on outside of Tomato just being a silly goose, as the mystery between Ariel and Tomato intensified in this episode, with the prevailing theory being that Tomato is not Airy from the prologue, but rather Ariel is Airy and Tomato is more like Ellen in the sense that she's a clone of sorts designed to look like Airy. That doesn't jive with me though, as it doesn't really make any sense. We already saw Lifrith in the prologue bond with Airy and allow her to pilot it, something that was impossible for her mother, so it's more likely that Ariel and her gun bits each have the souls of children from Vanidus and or Mercury within them, as seen in her fight with Ellen, and that's what what allows her to pilot a Gundam without using permit score and thus frying her brain, which is additionally why it doesn't emit a strong data storm because there are technically multiple pilots. I wanna fuck this vegetable! The episode, however, does consistently lean into the opposite theory of Ariel being Eri and Tomato being someone else, and this is even shown at the end of the opening where Eri is looking at Tomato and Chickenhead with the school behind them before turning the monitor off and showing her reflection, almost as a way to say that she's always watching through Ariel. Furthermore, I'm sorry, November's rough. We have the scene from episode 5 where the fortune teller girl's rock lands on 12 and she inquires if Tomato has a brother. This is just foreshadowing to the fact that Ariel has 11 gun bits and makes up one herself, which further hints that Tomato has 12 brother and sisters, as she even refers to her gun bits as everyone when fighting, so it's very possible that Ariel is, in fact, the original Eri, which is why Tomato is called Suletta and not Eri, rather than her mother just hiding her identity for other reasons, like, you know, because she's a murderer. Personally, I believe that Ariel is just like the gun bits and that she has a random child soul in her, and that's why Tomato connected with her when she was a child herself and when Ariel was Lifrith, rather than Ariel being the original Tomato herself. But the fact that the writing for this show has me thinking that much on how the mystery could go either way, theory crafting what could happen due to subtly throwing in different hints throughout the episode without calling attention to them, just means that the writing is that much better in this episode and is absolutely superb. The direction likewise did as it should and complemented it masterfully, making for an almost perfect episode complete with a birthday barbecue and all.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. While I greatly enjoy the series and like all the dumb memes the writing has started leaning into, like Tomato being dumb as bricks, what a fucking idiot, Miorine having the temperament of a literal chicken to match her chicken-headed hair, and more, the writing has been admittedly subpar outside of the innate silliness, almost as if they're holding back the Code Geass guy from writing something truly fun, like table fucking. I'd started to think that maybe my initial assertion of the writing and direction being mismatched, of which I made in my first video, was incorrect, but the series so far, especially in episode 7, has doubled down and showed that that is, in fact, the case. You're making me wet. Either way, this treble production results in this sporadic direction and animation, and when there's poor direction, there's no proper timing for the moments and jokes, and thus they lead to flat comedy, shots, and moments, which are all very important to an anime, or any visual medium for that matter, and that's doubly important here because the direction isn't propping up the subpar writing that's seemingly being restrained from being its best, as said. In episode 7, there's no good timing of bully camping to distract you from the fact that Chickenhead's big character moment was just her begging daddy for help like it was some melodramatic teen dramedy, or the fact that she's melting in every other frame. Oh god, not my baby! As a whole, anime productions, or anything really, benefit from a team who shares one or more person's creative vision, but this show not only reeks of something that was undercooked and rushed out, but also as something that was very clearly decided on by a committee of dudes in suits, rather than a single writer or director. They want to appease a younger generation to make more money, so they mandate all these things to be included to do so, but as a result, they don't have a clear direction to take the show. They just mandate what needs to be done, and then leave it to the creative team who tried to make it work, but very clearly didn't have enough time to do so, and that's showing in almost every area of the show so far. Comparing that to Bocchi the Rock this same season is night and day. That's a show that's likely suffering from similar production issues, but the team is all on board with the same creative ideas, so they make the time restraints work for them by doing all these different wacky things every episode, like using weird effects and simplistic animation techniques, or even real-life footage. Gundam doesn't have that because the team doesn't have the same unified creative vision, and even if they did, they'd likely be told that they can't do certain things anyways by Bandai and or Sunrise, and likewise, they probably don't even have enough time to do it. There's a reason why the Gundam OVAs and movies to come out recently, like Hathaway's Flash and the like, were a lot better than this, because it's the difference between a show made with one person's creative vision, or one team's creative vision, and one made by a bunch of suits trying to appeal to as many people as possible to make the most money possible. It's honestly a shame that the production ended up this way, but fortunately, I love Gundam the Witch From Mercury, as the OP is a certified bop, and I thoroughly enjoy the character designs, tomato sex, as well as the dumb things these characters get up to, like Pop here. The characters may be rather one note, as each of them has exactly one thing going for them, and I may seem like I bring up a lot in my videos that the anime isn't as good as it could be between the wonky animation and questionable storytelling, but that comes from a place of passion for the anime, and honestly, I still look forward to every single Sunday despite the criticisms I have for the show, and because I'm horny. The anime does actively melt in some shots, and this show was originally meant to be 24 episodes rather than a split core that continues later on in spring, so there's no denying that there is poor planning for this series and that it is indeed falling apart because of it, which is likewise reflected in the writing and directing, but it's not all bad. As I've already said, the characters are fun and the story can be amusing on top of having some decent to good action to keep you thoroughly entertained. But it's because of the aforementioned factors that this series is easily one of the most divided fans have been on, as it seems like people either love it or hate it, with only some in between, and I can see where that's coming from, especially since it seems to be divided between newer and older fans, with the former loving the series, for the most part anyways, and the older fans hating it. Why are they gay? Personally, as said, I think it's an enjoyable show, even if it's not the best, and it definitely has areas where it shines, like Tomato being like the writer for the anime in episode 8 and wanting the show to be silly high school hijinks, but then having Chickenhead be more like the producers and wanting serious Gundam plot, so she immediately kills all the fun, but I love her. Or the fact that she just doesn't know how to run a company at all and just lets others do it for her, and then when it's miraculously successful, she just takes all the credit for it and leaves everyone else in the dust. Her silly chicken-headedness and memes are what make every scene she's in fun, and Tomato is likewise just as fun in her own adorable way, if a bit annoying, and her dumb reactions are always amusing. 10 out of 10, all is forgiven, the show is a masterpiece. Likewise, the relationship in general is handled excellently, as you see their friendship naturally build up in the background, and sometimes foreground, of every episode, as Chickenhead, who originally was only using Tomato as a convenient tool, comes to see her as more of a friend, to the point of even helping her in her time of need, whilst also fulfilling her own needs, and it's done in a very natural way. The only downside to this is the random forced Yuri, as it's brought up as more or less of a joke in the first 2 episodes, and is then subsequently dropped after that, but then by episode 10, Tomato is suddenly taking it all very seriously and acting almost out of character, which then carries over to episode 11 for half the episode until it's resolved. But it's okay, because her stupidity makes it cuter. There's nothing wrong with the Yuri being there, it's just the way it's poorly handled and implemented that might bother some, as you can tell they wanted there to be some lily harvesting simply due to the arrangement, and they even wanted to work that into the machinations of the plot, but they hadn't actually planted the seeds to do so yet, so it comes off as forced as a result when they build up a best friend type of relationship the entire time, with Tomato clearly being excited to do best friend things, but then stuff it into the container of the engagement and try to conflate 2 different things. Goddamn, look at that rump! If they wanted the characters to suddenly start taking it seriously without it feeling forced, then they would have needed to spend time building up an entirely separate aspect of their relationship, or simply removed it entirely and had it been more about Tomato wanting to make their friendship official, only to find out that it never went beyond a casual fondness for someone who's easy to boss around, when the Tomato Dojin is only 3 pages long. They didn't really do either though, so as a result of that, plus it being resolved so fast, it feels a lot like forced drama, but who cares, because Bob is the best girl anyways. Outside of that, I find all of the other characters to be a treat, and although the writing is a bit basic, that doesn't take away from how enjoyable and memeable most of them are, as well as the story itself. Likewise, while the animation could be better, the sound design is fucking immaculate. And when the animation wants to, it also manages to be fantastic as well. Specifically in how weighty their movements are in episode 11, but also in how the robots move in the big fight in episode 9. Yoshi tore his fucking head off and then shot the other guy, that's red as fuck. While things like that look great in CG, they look even better in 2D, and animating such a thing isn't an easy feat considering how detailed the giant robots are. It may not look as impressive as the fights from the prologue and first episode, but the movements during this fight are spectacular, and it just goes to show that had this anime had more time to cook, we'd have gotten some damn good giant robot fights. But instead, we get animation like this. Are they even moving? But regardless of it all, Gundam Witch is a fun show that has its faults like many others, and while it may not be good on a more objective level, subjectively, I'm having fun with it, and if you are too, then that's all that really matters. That said though, if we had more episodes like 6 and 12, the anime would have been objectively fantastic. Yes, those episodes were dark, but that's not necessarily what made them good, because it's Gundam, so it doing fucked up shit was to be expected at some point, even if you're new to the series. Suletta spaghetti. Rather, what made episodes like 12 so good was the cohesiveness in the writing, directing, and so on, keeping the tension up the entire time, using camera angles and animation to signify big events currently happening to the characters, like when Tomato quite literally steps through a doorway of blood to signify her change into a killing machine, and stellar music playing at the perfect moment with great sound design. La Criatura. It's all very tight with the writing and production of the series matching up perfectly to deliver something extremely entertaining, but the issue is that it's spent the other 9 to 10 episodes bumbling around and not doing that. Great episodes like 6 and 12 don't make up for how subpar the rest of the episodes are, even if I personally enjoyed them. Rather, they just make me want the rest of the series to be the same, in the sense of having narrative cohesion with the production and proper juxtaposition with the silly high school antics and super serial politics, rather than baked corn and tomato paste. Silly tomato, you've got ketchup on your hand. Instead, when speaking on a more objective level, they spent a majority of their time trying to develop one-note characters and tell a story when all that was written in their notes was, she smushes a guy at the end. This scene will never not be funny. It was good at building up a mystery, but at this point, most people have likely guessed the conclusion to it, so it feels like it's run its course and should have already been revealed rather than continuing to sit on it, but I wish you'd sit on me, fat ass. As a result, the show lacked any real entertainment, for some people anyways, outside of memeing on the silly characters and the ways they act, as I've already said. Personally though, that was enough for me to thoroughly enjoy it, and while singing its praises, I also felt the character designs were great, especially for Ariel. The action was usually lackluster outside of key moments, however, because of the rushed, mismanaged, and strained production, but it was still able to deliver when it mattered, and it built intrigue throughout 11 episodes before dropping it on you in 12, literally, and hooking you for the next season. But had it removed those weaker episodes and gotten to the point episode 12 did by like episode 6, it would have made for an amazing production because it would have felt like no time was wasted, as everything would have been tight, like I bet Tomato is, succinct and engaging like 11 and 12, or just well told overall through a great combination of direction and writing like in episode 6, as Gundam Witch's strength itself lies in taking the cutesy school setting of typical anime and putting the Gundam twist on it where really dark and fucked up shit happens, like clones, grilled corn, brainwashed tomatoes, and bullies getting bullied. Taking that innocence and bathing it in blood, as quite literally seen at the end of episode 12, while still maintaining the silly innocence, is A++, and that's what it should have been building up to the entire time, or doing the entire time, but instead it dragged its feet, bumbled its way through, and then expected you to be amazed when it did the thing it should have been doing, which is clearly not going to cut it for some people who didn't want to sit through the other 11 episodes, as even if they think the finale is great, it doesn't make up for the other 10 bad episodes. Obviously, when speaking of personal enjoyment, however, your mileage is going to vary, but on an objective level in terms of writing, storytelling, direction, animation, and so on, it was a solid 5 out of 10 experience, but I'd personally give it a 7 out of 10 because of how much fun I had with it. It's certainly not for everyone, but it's definitely worth it if you're sexually attracted to tomatoes or just really like the Code Geass guy's works, because they really let him shine in the finale here, and hopefully they'll do the same in the next half. The strained production and poor planning not allowing for the entire series to be that way really shows and is quite unfortunate, but whether or not that's a deal breaker is up for you to decide and for me to farm views from, as I've been doing this entire time. So click here for more Gundam.